Welcome to Life Stories, where one sentence from a mother-in-law shattered the room more than the birth itself. That baby can't be our blood. It wasn't screamed. It didn't need to be. It was said calmly, coldly, while the new mother was still bleeding from labor, still cradling her daughter, still waiting for love to outweigh doubt. This isn't just a story about a child's paternity. It's about identity, silence, betrayal, and what happens when the truth you discover isn't the one you were searching for. What do you do when the woman who raised you isn't your mother? And what if the only way to protect your child is to break the very family you fought to belong to? Stay with us, because sometimes it's not the DNA that's missing, it's the humanity. Let me take you back to where it all began. She looked right at me, not at the baby in my arms, not at her son, who stood frozen beside me. Me. And then Evelyn Whitmore said the words that broke something I didn't even know was holding me together. That baby can't be our blood. For a second, the world stopped spinning. You could hear the IV monitor's slow beep, the faint wail of a newborn from down the hall, the rustle of someone closing a lunch bag outside our room. My arms instinctively curled tighter around Willa, her impossibly small body warming my chest. Jack blinked like he just stumbled into someone else's life. But I didn't flinch. I smiled. Not a sweet, forgiving smile. A knowing one. The kind of smile that says, I see what you're doing. And I'm not breaking this time. Because what Evelyn didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that I already had the truth. It just wasn't the one she was ready for. Jack and I met at Columbia. He was all twitchy knees and tapping fingers, always 3 thoughts ahead of whatever was happening in the room. I was the opposite, still, observant, careful. We balanced each other in a way that made no sense and all the sense in the world. We married quietly after graduation, just the two of us, my sister Molly in a thrifted floral dress and my dad Don wearing his old postal service tie. Evelyn didn't come, said the timing felt premature. Jack told me not to take it personally. She just wants things done right. But it wasn't about right. It was about control. And Evelyn didn't like not having it. She never raised her voice. That wasn't her style. Evelyn weaponized silence. And when she did speak, her words landed like knives wrapped in lace. You seem very emotional, Nora. Are you sure Jack's ready for all this? When we started trying for a baby, I thought maybe, just maybe, her sharp edges would soften. But then came the miscarriages. 1, 2, a doctor's quiet voice saying endometriosis, a future rewritten in exam room lighting. Evelyn's response? Maybe it's not meant to be. She said it to Jack. Not me. Never me. When I finally got pregnant with Willa, I was too afraid to believe it was real. I didn't even tell Jack until I was nearly 10 weeks along. I showed him the test while we were brushing our teeth. He looked at it, then at me, and dropped his toothbrush in the sink. We laughed and cried with toothpaste still on our faces. Willa came into the world after 17 hours of labor, screaming and perfect and defiant. She had hazel eyes and hair like ink, and the moment the nurse placed her on my chest, I felt everything shift. The weight of years, expectations, disappointments, they melted into that one moment. She blinked up at me like she already knew who I was, like she'd been waiting for me. Evelyn arrived the next day. Dressed in beige from head to toe, not a strand of hair out of place. She didn't bring flowers. She didn't ask how I was. She looked at Willa, and then she stared. Not like a grandmother, like a scientist examining a specimen. That flicker in her eyes, judgment, it crawled over her face like a shadow she didn't bother hiding. And then came the words, "This baby can't be our blood." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply looked at her, then at Jack, and said, "You're not seriously listening to this, are you?" He didn't answer. That silence said everything. Evelyn stepped closer, folded her arms, and dropped the bomb. If you have nothing to hide, then you shouldn't have a problem with the paternity test. And that's when I knew. She didn't want the truth. She wanted to own the narrative, so I said yes, but not to prove Willa belonged, to prove I did. What Evelyn didn't expect was the folder the doctor would carry in 2 days later, or the counselor who joined him, or the quiet way Jack's hands started shaking before anyone said a word. The results were clear. Yes, Willa was Jack's daughter. No, Evelyn was not Jack's mother. Silence shattered the room like broken glass. Evelyn blinked, lips parted, her breath caught. "I'm sorry," the counselor said gently. "There's no biological match. We ran it twice." Jack went still, like he was watching a life he no longer recognized crumble around him. And for the first time, Evelyn Whitmore looked like someone who had just lost everything she thought was hers. Not because of Willa, because of Jack. What would you do if your truth shattered someone else's identity? Have you ever felt like the outsider in a family that was supposed to be your own? The next part of this story begins not with revenge, but with a reckoning that no one saw coming. Read on. Evelyn didn't speak as we left the lab. She just walked, fast, mechanical, like her heels were carrying her somewhere safer than this moment. Jack didn't follow her. He just stood there, holding the manila folder like it contained the wreckage of his life. I didn't say anything either. What was there to say? "I told you so" felt cruel, and "are you okay?" felt pointless. Back home, Willa fell asleep on my chest, her tiny breath warm against my collarbone. Jack sat in the nursery's rocking chair, unmoving. I watched him watch her, his eyes tracing her features, trying, I think, to find pieces of himself not just in her, but in someone, anyone, now that the woman who raised him wasn't his mother. "I don't know who I am," he said quietly. "You're her father," I said, my voice soft but steady. "And you're my husband. That's a start." He looked at me like he wanted to believe that, like he needed to. But part of him had already floated away into the unknown. For 3 days, he was a ghost in our house. He moved like someone carrying too much weight, but refusing to let anyone help carry it. He didn't call Evelyn. She didn't call him. And I felt something strange. Not victory, not relief, just hollow. I'd spent years trying to be enough for a woman who, it turned out, never really had the authority to judge me in the first place. But now what? I kept thinking about the look on Evelyn's face. Not anger, not even shame, just devastation. And a part of me hated how much I still wanted her to say something, anything, to make it right. Jack finally broke the silence on the 4th night. "She's not just some woman who raised me," he said. "She was everything. My Christmas mornings, my scraped knees, my panic attacks, and now I don't know what any of that means." I nodded slowly. "You still lived it. It still matters." "But she lied to me." "We don't know that yet." He looked at me then. "Don't we?" And that was the question neither of us wanted to answer. If Evelyn had known, if she'd hidden it for 32 years, what else had she buried? The next morning, Evelyn sent an email. Just one line. "We need to talk, please." I didn't reply. I showed it to Jack. He stared at the screen for a long time. Then he deleted it. But she didn't stop. A day later, there was a knock on the door. Not frantic, just patient. I opened it. Evelyn stood there, no makeup, no beige armor, just jeans, a coat, and a face I barely recognized. Creased, exhausted, human. "May I come in?" she asked. I didn't want to say yes. Every cell in my body told me to shut the door and protect my daughter from the woman who had tried to erase her. But then I looked past her, at Jack, standing behind me, his face unreadable, and I stepped aside. She didn't go to Jack. She didn't even glance at Willa, who was asleep in the bassinet beside the couch. She walked to the kitchen table and sat down like someone reporting to a tribunal. "I don't know how it happened," she began. "I don't know if it was a mistake at the hospital, if someone switched bracelets, or if—" She paused, swallowed, and then met Jack's eyes. "If your father lied to me." Silence. I had a difficult labor. I remember blacking out. For hours. He said you were in the nursery. Said everything was fine. I never questioned it. She laughed bitterly. He was so insistent, so certain, and I was too tired to fight. Jack's face twisted, half fury, half disbelief. "So you don't know?" She shook her head. "I didn't, but I wondered, a few times, when people said you didn't look like either of us, when your blood type didn't match mine. But I ignored it, because loving you was the easiest thing I've ever done." The room spun in the weight of her words, and for a second I didn't hate her. But then she looked at me, really looked at me, and said, I didn't mean to hurt you, but when I saw Willa, I panicked. She didn't look like Jack, and something inside me, something ugly, came out. You didn't just hurt me, I said, my voice breaking. You tried to carve me out of my own family. She nodded, eyes filling. I was wrong, I know that now, but I lost the only identity I've ever had, and I lashed out at the one person who still had hers. And just like that, I saw her not as a villain, but as something worse. A woman who had built her entire identity on a lie and had nothing left to hold. Jack didn't speak. He walked past her into the nursery. I followed. He stood over Willa, his hand resting gently on her back. She looks like you, he whispered. I smiled through tears. She's stubborn, just like you. He turned to me. I don't know if I can forgive her. You don't have to, I said, but maybe you can still let her try. Have you ever felt torn between truth and forgiveness? Between protecting yourself and giving someone a second chance? What Evelyn says next will change everything. And not just for Jack. Don't miss the next part of their journey. Evelyn never came back to the house after that day. She sent a letter instead. Handwritten, careful cursive that reminded me of wedding invitations and recipe cards. Jack didn't open it right away. He left it on the kitchen counter for 3 days, untouched, like it might burn him if he looked too closely. When he finally did, I watched from across the room. He didn't cry. He didn't say anything for a long time. Just folded the letter back into its envelope, pressed his palm flat over it, and whispered, "She said goodbye." Not "I'm sorry," not "I want to make this right." Just goodbye. And somehow that hurt more. Life doesn't stop just because your story cracks open. There were diapers to change, midnight cries to soothe, groceries to buy, laundry to fold. Grief and healing had to fit between feedings and 2 a.m. lullabies. Jack moved slowly through those days. He was gentler, quieter, less certain of himself. But he was present. He was there. One night, maybe 2 weeks later, I found him in the nursery, holding Willa and staring at the moonlight slipping through the curtains. She asked if I'd let her stay in my life, he said, but only if I wanted her to. And do you? I asked. He looked down at Willa. I don't know. I think I want peace. Not revenge, not explanations, just peace. It wasn't an answer, but it was enough. We never told many people about the DNA test, not because we were ashamed, but because some truths feel too fragile to place in other people's hands. Molly knew. She sent a care package with lavender tea, a candle that smelled like vanilla and second chances, and a card that read, "Blood is biology. Love is a choice. You've already made yours." My dad flew in to meet Willa a month later. He held her like something sacred, tears in his eyes before he even said hello. "She's got your mom's eyes," he whispered, "the kind that see right through you." We didn't talk about Evelyn. He didn't need to ask. He just knew. Months passed. Seasons shifted. The cold loosened its grip on Portland. Willa started smiling more, babbling like she had stories of her own to tell. And Jack began to find his rhythm again. We went on walks through the park. We took photos. We started laughing at little things, burnt toast, diaper blowouts, the way Willa furrowed her brow like a tiny philosopher. And one quiet Sunday morning, Jack turned to me at the kitchen table and said, "I want to find her." I looked up, startled. "Evelyn?" He shook his head. "My birth mother." I felt something tighten in my chest. Not fear, not jealousy, just the old ache of everything we didn't know. "Are you sure?" I asked. "I'm not," he said, "but I think Willa deserves to know where she comes from, and so do I." So we began the search. It took 3 months, one private investigator, and a series of closed doors. Adoption records sealed, hospital records misplaced, names that led to nowhere. But then, one afternoon, Jack received a call. Her name was Margaret. She lived in a small town in Northern California. She had no idea where her son had gone. She'd been told he died hours after birth, a stillborn. She'd never stopped wondering. We didn't rush. Jack wrote her a letter first, long, careful, honest, and she wrote back. Then came phone calls, tentative, emotional, filled with pauses that said more than words could. And finally, we met her. Margaret opened the door of a modest house on a quiet street, her eyes already glassy with tears. She reached out, not quite touching Jack, like she was afraid he might vanish. He stepped forward and hugged her. She broke. "I've dreamed of this," she said, her voice shaking. "For so long, I was scared I made you up." "You didn't," Jack said. "I'm real. I'm here." She looked at me then, at Willa in my arms. "And she's yours?" "She's ours," I said, smiling. Margaret reached out and gently touched Willa's cheek. "She looks like my mother," she whispered, that same stubborn chin. And just like that, something healed. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough. Evelyn never tried to reach out again, and maybe that's how it had to end. Not with forgiveness or confrontation, but with quiet acceptance that some relationships can't be rebuilt. And that's not always failure. Sometimes it's freedom. I still think about her. I think about the love she gave Jack, the damage she did, the pain we all had to unlearn. And I've come to believe that people can be both things, good and broken, loving and cruel, sometimes at the exact same time. But I no longer carry her weight, because this family we've built, imperfect, patched together with grief and grace, is real. I see it in the way Jack watches Willa sleep, like every breath she takes makes the world worth trying again. I feel it in the way we fight now, with care, not ego. I know it in the way Willa wraps her fingers around mine like she trusts me with everything. And maybe that's the most honest kind of family, not the one you're born into, the one you stay for. What part of this story stayed with you the most? If this story touched your heart, comment 100 below. Where in the world are you watching from? Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that love is what makes a family. Thank you for watching Life Stories.